Digging Deeper listeners, we are back with another edition of Digging Deeper, focusing on yet another really important topic today, and that is social justice. I have with me probably some of the most frequent flyers on this podcast. Mark, I think you're on like 25 in a row. Nat, you've been here a lot lately with this series as well. Glad to have you both.
Thanks for inviting us.
Yeah. Real quick, from one person who's enjoyed one Father's Day to somebody who's enjoyed 32 or 3. How was your Father's Day?
Very nice. Yep. Natalie came over. She was my only child.
So your favorite kid came over on Father's Day.
I had 2 sons out of the country, so they had an excuse. But
we are going to celebrate Father's Day a little later.
All right.
Yes.
That's totally cool. But I just want to use this opportunity. Nat, you were the only child that came over to celebrate your dad's Father's Day.
And to be fair to Nicole, she had some important things going on.
You were the only child to come over.
And we've got a Father's Day deal planned for July, I think.
Right. Yeah. Before next Father's Day, we have something planned. Yeah.
Right. Well, celebrating your dad and our country in the same month. What a great month.
How about you? How was your Father's Day?
It was good.
New dad.
Yeah. No, I mean, they were very similar. We got to teach on social justice, which was fun. And then, I celebrated my dad, and it was kind of cool. My brother and I went over to my dad's, and we celebrated him, but we're all dads, and that was kind of fun. And
cool. Yeah,
that was it. But so we you guys didn't come on here to listen to us talk about being dads, although that is fun. We have a lot to dig into with social justice. So before we get to that topic, I want to kind of focus on our series. I believe we are now technically halfway through this series. I could be wrong, but I think we're right about there. So I want to hear what has encouraged you guys so far just about our church and going through this series.
Well, I would say I think there's been a really good attempt and a focus on, we're not just, so with some of these issues, it's easy just to be really black and white. This is what the Bible says. All right, moving right along. And I think all of our teachers have done a great job of not thinking different about things, but thinking deeper. So not different, but deeper, and acknowledging that, we know what the Bible says about things, and we're not thinking differently. We're not like changing our views on things, but we're looking at the deeper dynamics of a person and what leads to someone who might struggle with some of these things going on in society. And so I think there's been a really great attempt of looking at the whole dynamic of a struggler like any of us, and someone doesn't just wake up and want to change their gender. There's dynamics there, and I think that our pastors are doing a great job of being very empathetic and compassionate, and not thinking different about things, but thinking deeper, and just addressing that. I think we are trusted a lot more in the pulpit and in our churches or in our counseling offices when we seek to understand how someone got to where they are. And so I think that when we get to the root of issues, instead of just looking at them black and white, but really looking at them deeper, we earn a lot of trust with people, and we show ourselves to be very safe people, and that's what Jesus did. So,
I've been really encouraged by this series. The response has been overwhelming. People seem to really appreciate what we're trying to do. Obviously, there's a lot of chatter, a lot of information, a lot of stuff on these topics out there. And not all of it coming from a biblical perspective, just put it that way. So I think it's easy for Christians included to get confused. Like, what do I really, like if you hear something over and over and over again from academics, from the media, from politicians, whatever, laws become instituted, and it's easy to think, well, maybe that's okay. So hitting the scriptures on these issues are very, very important, but to do so in a way that emphasizes, as Natalie just shared, what is the deeper dynamic that's going on down in someone's heart? How can we be more compassionate? And not just to know what to believe, but how to behave, like how to act and love like Christ. Because all these issues are so complex, you can't just talk about them from one angle.
That's good.
You have to come at them from different And it's okay to do so, coming at them from different vantage points. And so it's been a real challenge. I know for me as a teacher, it's been real stretching. I've learned a lot. So far, so good. Still standing.
Yeah. No, like you've said, we've said it here before. These topics are so complex, and even a 40-minute teaching and an hour podcast afterwards unpacking it still is scratching the surface on a lot of these. But I've been encouraged too, and I think I echo everything you guys have said. But I think it's been received. I've heard a lot of I needed to hear that. And while I think our teachers are doing a good job of bringing forth truth, information, opening people's eyes to things they didn't know, I also think we're doing a really cool job of that whole instilling grace amongst these topics. From the teachings I've heard, there's always have grace in this topic, have grace with us as we teach it. I know Austin's been hitting that pretty hard. And I think that's really settling with people yes, when I engage in these conversations with other people, there needs to be grace. And I think that's been really cool too. I would hope that if somebody has come to any one of our campuses that disagrees with our church on these topics, they wouldn't walk away feeling hurt, attacked, or angry, but actually all right, I feel like I could go to any one of these teachers or anyone at the church and have a further conversation.
Yeah. Well, one thing for sure is because of the culture wars just being heightened, it's easy for Christians to go one way or the other too far, too progressive or maybe too conservative. By conservative, I'm not saying biblical, but that might be part of it. But this idea of it goes farther than what the Scripture teaches. So it's just understandable that we would have many of us that slant too far one way or the other. And so I think this has been helpful to try to bring people to a sense of balance on this. And I think the most fun for me has been trying to teach the deeper worldviews. Mm-hmm. There's a deeper worldview at the core of all of this, and that's been fun to teach. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think even opening people's eyes to the fact that something like social justice, this isn't a concept that's 5 years old. This is literally, it is, there is stuff in the Bible about this. And so I think that's been cool. Mm-hmm. I had fun with that one this weekend. But moving on, this is kind of a fun question for me to think about. So we have a 9-week series. Obviously, we can't talk about every single thing going on in the culture. But if we could add one more week and teach one more topic, what is a topic you would have liked us to be able to go into?
Well, I certainly think mental illness is a huge, a huge thing in our society, not just in our society, but everyone in some way or another struggles with seasons of anxiety, depression. So but I don't know if that I think our pastors are amazing. That might be the task of a professional counselor to take a topic.
Guest teacher.
I don't know if I don't know if it'd probably be really hard, but I think our pastors could tackle that. But I think just normalizing mental illness in our society, unwrapping some of the stigmas around it, but also addressing it from a biblical worldview of where is Jesus with you in your anxiety? Where is, because there's certainly ways where our culture might take mental illness in certain directions that aren't good either. And so, but there's ways the church takes it in directions that aren't the best either. And so I think that when I say the church, I mean capital C church, not necessarily River Valley, but I think we could have addressed mental illness and how to look at it with a biblical and professional worldview. And obviously I'm saying that with a twin sister who's a very good counselor, and we talk a lot about this.
Right. So obviously it's something that's near and dear to your heart.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. And I've struggled with anxiety before, and I've been thankful for the professional counseling I've received with that. And I know others also have wrestled with that, Christians who, Yeah.
I actually thought about that topic also. The whole idea of therapy and how the place of medication, working with therapy, the difference between, say, Christian therapy and maybe pastoral counseling or biblical counseling. Those are confusing things. I even myself, I have a hard time understanding all and where the line is on all that. Plus, what about the spiritual warfare component? Because in the Bible, you see a lot of deliverance, and you see a lot of helping people break free from spiritual bondage that maybe we wouldn't call mental illness. So to me, jury's out. To me, even on the topic, and I'd like to dig in with some people a lot smarter than me on it, and try to help Christians understand what is the difference between some of these different methods to helping people be healthy in every way, emotionally and spiritually. I also thought maybe something on education, like public school, homeschool, Christian school. That'd be interesting. How about, have you ever done anything on marijuana?
No, that actually was on my short list of potential things to have a digging deeper on.
Yeah.
Later in the year.
It's legal now, and
yeah, that would have been a good one.
So that would be interesting. I also thought about like just church and politics, like what role does the church play in politics, and why not throw in a couple more end times?
Yeah.
And I think we've done a little bit on that.
Yeah, we did a digging deeper not too long ago.
And maybe science in the Bible, like creation, evolution. Would be interesting.
Evolution. Those are some good ones. I had politics was the number one thing on my list. I would have liked to. We can save that for late October, early November.
Yeah.
As we get into voting season in a very crucial November. Or we can not. So, and then another one that was like, we've kind of mentioned it here when we had Adam, but when we were talking about kind of the marriage and sexuality, like you and Adam emphasized the importance of like an understanding of singleness and how you shouldn't just naturally go, pity people. And I would have liked to hear like a teaching on that. I mean, just because a lot of people in our church are single, and I think we address this with the marriage and sexuality, but some churches can idolize marriage, and so what would have a teaching kind of been to open our eyes to the power and the freedom and the really cool things that God empowers people who are single to be. So that was something that came on my list. And then a funny one, as I was talking about you guys earlier, conspiracy theories, kind of what to do with them. Some people probably have a lot of hours logged into kind of digging into some conspiracies. And
like the most typical conspiracy theories that
like
Christians have?
Like the Bible and Bigfoot kind of thing? Or
well, so like when I ask people what are some conspiracies you'd get behind, obviously, like they could go into the JFK thing. I think COVID brought up a lot of people thinking that the government's behind a lot they're not telling us.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah,
Trump won.
Yeah, the
stuff
election.
like that.
I mean, there's a lot. I think that a lot of our church people, because it's interesting. It's a rabbit trail, if anything, and ultimately, a lot of us will never know the answer to the conspiracy theories that we spend a lot of time thinking about. So that one. Aliens.
well, there's bloggers online who know the answers.
Right.
Yeah.
That's one of those topics that we're okay with you going to those internet resources, but
I'm going out Bigfoot hunting tonight.
Yeah, squatching as it's called, believe it or not.
Squatching, yeah.
Yeah.
No, I'm not.
I used to watch a show on like the History Channel or A&E about the Bigfoot hunters, and I was like, they're not going to find him, because if so, it's going to be on the news. It's not going to be on channel 58 at 9 p.m. Anyways, I digress.
Those guys wrecked it for me. I used to kind of believe in Bigfoot, but after watching those clowns.
Yeah, you're just not into it?
Yeah.
Men in
Somebody
Bigfoot
listening's
suits.
offended that you just called him a clown.
All right.
But yeah, let's switch gears. So if you've been listening, a staple of these podcasts have been asking those that taught kind of, what didn't make it to your final message. So Mark,
Me to go first?
Yeah, go first and I'll follow up.
Lots. But this is something that is going to have some emphasis over the next few weeks, so there's a chance to talk more about it, which is nice. It's such a huge topic. But I think the one thing is a quote by C.S. Lewis, and then unpacking it a little bit, where he says in his essay on, it's called First and Second Things, that you can't get second things by putting them first. The only way to get second things is to put first things first. And so he's talking about how it's so easy. For example, if you want to be happy, and you put that first, you'll never get it, because that's not a first thing. It's not worthy of being the first thing. Worshiping God and following him is what's most important. And then you can get happiness thrown in. Same thing with, everyone liking me. That's not a good first emphasis.
Right.
At best, it's second. But if you put that first, you lose. He says you'll lose not only the first thing, but you'll lose the second thing also. You can't get it. So the reason I bring that up is social justice is such a hot issue, and in Christians with the church, that a lot of people are making it the first thing. They're making it the gospel. And social justice is not the gospel. The gospel is an indicative versus an imperative. An indicative means it's something that's already true, that's been done for us, that we receive by grace. That's the gospel. It's what Jesus has done for us. It's free. An imperative is what we do. Because we're Christians, we then go do these things God wants us to do. So social justice is not the gospel. Social justice is not even in the gospel. Social justice comes from the gospel. So it's because we're saved, because we're believers, we then have a mandate to be about justice. And so I think today it's getting really convoluted where, social justice is the gospel. Go do the gospel. We don't go do the gospel. We share the gospel. And then we also live the Christian life along with that. So I think that's an important distinction. Some of it might be semantics, but I think it's an important distinction to keep the gospel first and not social justice as it's the outflow of the gospel.
Okay. Now, your thinking face was on, but
Yeah, no. I think that's, gosh, yeah. Well, I certainly would say that. So our mission or our tagline at River Valley is connect, grow, go, and I think certainly young people do that backwards. We go, but we don't want to grow and connect, and so we are really good at some of our statement, And so I'd certainly love to see. I think I'm not just trying to point out young people. I know many people that are really good at serving, but I do think young people are they're really good at that, really compassionate and all of that. But we have a harder time really connecting somewhere. We don't want to put our we don't want to just put our shoes down somewhere. We want to go and chase things and all that and post about it and all that and growing. It's whatever. But we like to go. And I certainly think that sometimes we can miss out on some of the really neat parts of our Christian life if all we're doing is just going and not, putting our planting ourselves is the word I was looking for. Yeah. I mean, I totally agree with what you're saying, Dad. I do think though, I don't know, I'm trying to think through this. I think there's a huge fear with, sometimes I think I do think justice is so central to God's heart. So it's maybe hard for me to think that it's not the gospel in the way I agree. I'm tracking. Yeah.
Again, I'll be the first to admit some of this is semantics.
Yeah.
And I am not saying that we don't do justice.
Of course,
we are so commanded and mandated. It is the heart of God. We spent a lot of time talking about that in the service. But I like the word, I think, kingdom better. Kingdom living includes justice. I just think when you make social justice the gospel, then a couple things happen. It can turn into the social gospel, which has happened all throughout history, which is more like loving people, feeding the poor, and that sort of, it's great, but it sort of pushed out. It was the main thing, so it pushed out the simple message of how to get people to heaven,
Right.
And then,
right.
And then I think the other thing, if we're not careful, is it becomes this sort of this I'm a good person, I'm saved because I do these things, and so that's obviously not.
Yeah, I agree. If I have my history correct, though, I think the social justice movement came out of the holiness movement, where people were Christianity is just about, being holy, going to church, to the detriment of actually getting outside of the church, if that makes sense. So I think we've seen like 6 different movements in church history where it's been like one movement is really strong and then we forget about the other ways of parts of our Christian life. So there's like holiness movement. There's there was like the contemplative movement with the Desert Fathers. There's the social justice movement, and I'm missing a few of the other ones. But these all are pendulum, and I think the healthiest, most holistic Christians are the ones that have, they have all the movements in a balance. We want to be holy, but we also want to be compassionate, and we also want to be contemplative in some ways. And so we go wrong when we are like, it's just about social justice, but not about holiness, or it's just about holiness and not about, does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
So.
No, totally. Yeah, and I think through all these topics, that's been kind of there have been those pendulum swings with every topic, right? The truth and the love. Like, we want to be all about the truth and why people shouldn't be doing that, but we also want to be about the love, and we've been finding that balance, and I think that rings true here as well.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. The gospel message can often be offensive, and because we need to tell the truth about why people need the gospel, right? Whereas social justice, if it becomes the gospel, that's very, very attractive. People love that. So I think it's easy for Christians to sometimes make that more the gospel because nobody's going to get upset at them or offended. But the actual message of Christ can take the back burner, which becomes a problem. So proclamation and demonstration are what's important.
Yeah, totally. So for mine, I kind of have 2. I didn't, and I don't know about you and the other teachers, I actually didn't go into any specific social justice movements. I was kind of back and forth with like, do I want to spend a few minutes and talk about like, Black Lives Matter or women's rights or like the Me Too and what the perception is and what they're trying to do and what we as a church should have in relation to them. But I decided not to, just because I think that can be, I don't know, really... Yeah, I don't know. I just chose. I was feeling like I shouldn't. And actually, my first comment I got when I got off after church, somebody came up and said, "Hey, you didn't name drop," and I appreciate that because I think what can happen is a lot of people can be just ready to harp on those, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more in a few minutes. But yeah, I went back and forth, and then I chose not to speak to any of the specific movements that are going on. More so just kind of stayed with the broad look. And then another one I kind of wish I would have gotten more in depth on. I just kind of hit on it. I talked about different traps we can fall into when it comes to social justice. So there's the ones that are just pure evil, doing injustice. And that's just the evil in the world. There are those that are practicing social justice incorrectly. And then I think there's kind of a trap that we fall into in the church of what I called reactive justice. And it's that idea of seeing the people on Fox News or CNN or Twitter and just kind of going to attack them in the name of the gospel kind of thing. And so I kind of wish I would have camped on that a little bit more, but I kind of did a flyby and called it good. So
right, a big part. I wonder if that's a whole nother sermon on not just like God's heart for justice, but methodology. Like I think that's a big part of this conversation. I mean, it leaves so many questions. I know for me, like I went to a Black Lives Matter protest, and that's what I felt like I should do without supporting the Black Lives Matter movement. But I felt like I should go to that. Other Christians felt strongly about not, and so I think, but there could be some more. There could be some black and white ways of how we should practice social justice and how we shouldn't, which I think you hit on a little bit. But I wonder if that's another sermon on just really practically, what does this look like? I don't know.
Yeah. Because, and I even mentioned where I think, social justice, I was trying to get cute with a couple of one-liners, like it's not always going to be politically correct or socially acceptable outside the church or inside the church. I do think that certain believers, as they perceive what the Lord's calling them to do, might do things that other believers in their same congregation might get upset at. Just based on methodology, and I think that's just something we're going through, and I think that's where the grace component comes in. But same thing early on. a friend, a black friend, kind of made a plea like, I want to be heard. Come support me, and stood next to them and showed them I loved them, and I wasn't yelling and screaming. I held something that talked about Jesus' love, and I think there are people that be like, whoa, 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 that was super wrong. But I think if I went before the Lord and we talked about that, I don't think he would. But
yeah, for the record, Tim and I both agree with the statement Black Lives Matter. I don't want to speak for you, but the movement, I believe, is not biblical.
Oh, correct. And I prayed about it. My showing up to that was a personal response to this one specific friend.
Same.
Yeah. And it did a lot for them and stuff. And I don't think I participated further on, but yeah, the movement, the organization, I do not donate to them. Right. I don't put their bumper sticker on my car.
Yeah, but some of it is probably okay, but some of it is not. Yeah. Yeah,
well, again, I even say that where like there's some aspects of these things that are right, but as a whole, but we go off course when we start following movements and not God, and that's why discernment with the Holy Spirit is so crucial. If I go to heaven, will God say I made the wrong move? Maybe, but I personally don't think so. So yeah, the methodology at the end of the day is where I think a lot of us might differ. But yes, chose to not go down that route from the pulpit. So yeah. Anything else before we move on to? All right. So Nat, I want to throw this one to you. We've talked about this a little bit with every topic. Myths and misnomers surrounding the church and social justice. So things that we just might believe, but haven't actually dug into if it's true.
Yeah. Well, I think something that you hit on, Dad, in your sermon is sort of was this idea that, social justice is really a buzzword. I think here in Southern Oregon, it's very, ooh, what? You're woke? What do you mean by social justice? And I really would love if we redeemed the word. I think there's a myth that all of it is maybe really progressive and unbiblical. And it's just, social justice is just social justice. It doesn't have to be a scary word, I think, to us. I know just there are many prophets, especially the prophet Amos, who really cared about social justice. And Amos, Jeremiah talked about Isaiah, Micah, Ezekiel, all of these prophets were their litmus tests in a lot of ways of if the people were truly following God, as they would go into cities and see if there were needy on the streets and poor people and if people were being oppressed and how the widows were being treated and the sick and children. And if those people were being neglected, I think in many ways the prophets were like, these people aren't worshiping God, if this is happening in these cities. And so I think the prophets were really big on justice. And there was even a time in the book of Amos when Amos walks into northern Israel and he sees all these people being neglected, the vulnerable in society. And he goes, wait, you Israelites, the ones who were oppressed once by Egypt and who were, pushed aside and abused by the wealthy in Egypt, you guys are doing the same thing to other people. Am I seeing this right? And so I think that the prophets were really cared about social justice, but obviously it was tethered to God's heart, and so I think it's important to redeem that word, but probably good for us to define it, and so secondly, I think a myth is that it has to be a really big thing that we're a part of with social justice. Like we have to be part of really big movements. And I don't think that's wrong, but I think justice works its way out in three different areas. First, I think all justice has to start in the heart. And we have to think through how we, Romans 5, when we were weak and poor and vulnerable and needy, that's when God rescued us. And so the gospel has to work its way out in our heart. After that, it has to work its way out in our closest relationships. So some people want to go save the world and start orphanages in Africa, but then they go home and treat their family horribly. They oppress their wife, they oppress their husband, they treat their siblings like crap. And I think that justice has to work its way out first in our communities, in our closest proximities. When I gossip about a friend, I'm oppressing them. When when I contribute to rumors, I am putting people in vulnerable situations. And so I think justice first works its way out in our hearts, then it works its way out in our closest relationships. And then when we have those things dialed, then I think we should practice it in the world. And I think we all practice it differently. Some people are passionate about the elderly. Some people are passionate about the unborn. Some people are passionate about children, you know? And I don't think we should look at someone and say, you need to be passionate about my cause. Your cause isn't important. Like, we all have different passions on our heart, things that make our heart bleed. And I think it's okay if someone practices it in one way and maybe someone does it differently. And so the main myth I think I want to maybe rewind is just, I think there is a progression with social justice. I think there is an order that we should practice it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's
I was a little long-winded, sorry, but
You got anything?
I emphasized in my message that we have to define social justice, accurately. And there's social justice A and there's social justice B. And A is biblical. It lines up with the word. B is unbiblical. It contradicts the scripture. And so I think one of the misnomers, there's a couple of them that came to mind, is that as a Christian, since Jesus was about justice, we should be about all injustice. We should be involved, with all of it. And frankly, that's not true, because we need to have discrimination. Like, we need to do justice the right way. And so I think sometimes Christians maybe get so excited about doing justice that they're not really thinking through exactly, okay, what are they actually saying? Like, what is this really about? You know what I mean? So I think there's that part of it, that the Christians do need to be very aware of why this and what they're actually doing, rather than, let's just go do justice. It needs to be with discrimination. I'm sorry.
I know the word you're looking. Discretion.
Discretion.
Yeah.
Thank you. The other thing that I think is a misnomer is that social justice B, we might think, well, I just put all these people in that category, and that's not really fair, because a person might believe some things that are in more the social justice B, not lining up with scripture category, but that doesn't make them a social justice B warrior. So we want to, again, lump people into categories. I think it's important to realize that there's some fluidity here, and it can kind of ebb and flow. And some Christians might think, well, I can't listen to anything that person has to say. I can't be in a relationship with them. I can't in any way partner with them. And I think that's kind of tragic, because, truth is true no matter who says it. And I think I remember, so I have a real personal struggle. Maybe you guys do or don't also, but Bill Maher, kind of a tough guy to like, especially with how ugly he can be towards the faith. And I know he's made God's image. He's, God loves him deeply. But I was listening to a podcast that he was being interviewed here recently, and I could not believe how many things he said that I agreed with. Like I agreed with a ton of stuff he was saying. So again, that's just an example. Just because somebody is so opposed to so much of what we might be, doesn't mean that there aren't things that they can that are good that you can agree with.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, it can. It's really interesting when you start kind of challenging yourself to read content from somebody that disagrees with you, or from the other side of the fence. But I want to applaud Austin. I know that as he was preparing for some of these messages, he was intentionally, he has a stance or a view or whatever. Well, he was reading things from both sides to gain a bigger understanding of the whole picture. And I was talking to a friend as Christians, how much do we read of stuff that could oppose? Because it could shake you. It could really bring up some doubts. And I think that's good, but how much, is overwhelming. But I think that's a good challenge to, and kind of one of my myths was don't associate with anything at all with something that has a little bad press. A better way to say it is don't associate with anything at all with something you don't agree with. I would say that might be something that's kind of said around the church. And to your point, if we kind of feel like we have the strength and we're secure, listening to something that maybe is a little different, we'll be able to actually use discernment and maybe pull something that we can learn while not getting be sidetracked or derailed. If I'm making sense.
Yeah,
for
Do you
sure.
guys? I have a question, so I'll be the host for now, Tim. No, do you guys think sometimes Christians can get too focused? How do I ask this? I'll just ask it. Too focused on soul winning instead of physical social justice. So like, we might think, oh well, you know, feeding someone is good, but if they're going to hell, what's the point? You know, do you think sometimes we can get too focused on, because God calls us to do all different types of justice. So like, you know, Good Samaritan, I don't even know if he shared Christ with the Samaritan, but he met financial needs, physical needs, emotional needs. You know, he put him in a bed and put him in a hospital or whatever, so I wonder, do you think sometimes we only care about souls, which is important, but forget that present needs are very important too. Do you guys think sometimes we get caught up with that?
I think my opinion, it's a good question. I think there's certain categories of Christians who are highly motivated and empowered to proclaim the gospel, whether it's street evangelism, much more aggressive at work witnessing or at school or whatever, and that's awesome. But maybe that kind of a wiring of a person might not think about the physical needs that someone might have. But I also would say that I think the greater trend this is totally just me, what I have witnessed is that Christians are much more on the side of, I want to do good, I want to help you, I want to meet your needs, but not as good ever talking about Jesus. That's just what I see.
Yeah. I wonder, because that certainly is dangerous if you just want to meet short-term needs but not meet their long-term satisfaction of like Christ being in their heart. I wonder though if like meeting someone's short-term needs, like their present pain, I wonder if that opens the door of them knowing you really care about them. You know what I mean?
I do think that and I don't know if I would feel comfortable, none of us are, but like saying that this is something common amongst Christians, but I know in my life, to your point, if I am going to like reach out to somebody, in my mind is like, okay, well, if I haven't talked to Jesus about them in 3 interactions, what's the point? So I think that's something that I've kind of struggled with, while instead of saying, well, like this whole time you're showing Jesus, the Lord's gonna drop that moment when he's ready. I think that's kind of something I've struggled with. And you said that kind of originally, but Mark, I could see your point as well. Well, we're maybe whether it's the younger people, those goers of us that maybe focus more on the doing than the. I could see both sides, but I know for me, I struggled with the like, got to talk about Jesus. I, Tim Sorensen, have to talk about Jesus, or else this person is not going to understand the love of God. It made it all about me, and that kind of swung and missed, I think.
Yeah, yeah, it's good.
Yeah. Great question, host Nat.
Okay, back to you.
No, I'm going to get emails being like, hey, Tim, drop the mic, give it to her, get out of here. Any other kind of myths that you guys thought about? We covered a lot of good ones.
Well, just that if there's somebody you really disagree with, it's really the ideology. You know what I mean? We tend to be so focused on the person, that you're this and you're that. You know, we got to be careful of that and just say, you know, it's more the ideology behind it that I'm concerned about. I don't know if that came out right. Of course, we're very concerned about people, but I'm talking about when we're dealing with a particular issue of disagreement, false justice kinds of ideology. It's not people that we're in opposition against. our mindset should be it's more the ideology that we're concerned about.
I like that. I remember when Amy Coney Barrett was on the stand or not on the stand, but she was going to be nominated into the Supreme Court, and Governor Klobuchar or Senator whatever from Michigan, she was saying Minnesota. Anyways, okay, so she was saying, "Hey, Amy, you attacked Justice Roberts for this, this, and this." And I remember Amy Coney Barrett, she said, "Well, I don't attack people. I attack ideas, you know?" And I thought that was really
That's
powerful.
good. Yeah.
I thought that was like such a bold and a beautiful thing to say.
That's excellent.
Yeah.
Excellent example.
And so I love that you said that, Dad, because I think that's so important, you know?
Mm-hmm.
No, yeah, that's very, very good. Yeah, no, I had a half thought, but I'm going to go ahead and keep it off the table. We might get to it. All right, so kind of the last question. I do know that you were asked one question after the message, and I want to address. But my last question for you guys is how your view on this topic has changed over the past few years. And I say few because I just think that this has ramped up in our society for the last 2 or 3 years, and so I kind of want to hear what, if anything, has changed in your guys' view on this topic.
Well, definitely, it's on my radar now. I mean, for years, and I've been thinking, why is this? Why was social justice really not a part of my upbringing? Not really a part of my Christian church experience. There's probably a lot of reasons for that. And now it's everywhere, and everybody's talking about it. So that's one of the reasons, the church is forced, to deal with it and to be looking at it. I mean, even men like Martin Luther King Jr., he wasn't even necessarily with the people around me that I grew up with and some of my, mentors. And I don't even remember him being talked about much, and, Juneteenth, what is that? You know what I mean? Now, I know it just became a federal holiday, but still, these are things that are becoming common words and people and concepts today. And back when I was younger, it wasn't really even on my radar. So I'm thankful it is. I'm thankful of much that I've learned. I feel like I understand the issue. I mean, I have a lot to learn, but I understand it better as far as justice A and justice B, the difference between just justice and unjust justice, and how as Christians we can try to hit some balance on it.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, I think here in Grants Pass, some of these topics aren't necessarily on our front doorstep in some ways. And so they are in Grants Pass, but we might not see them like we'd see in a city like Portland or New York City.
Right.
And so I think that might be some of the reason why I haven't thought about it as much until the last 5 years, going off to school, being around diversity, different people from different backgrounds and different experiences and childhoods and all of that. And so, so I think just diving into the person of Jesus, Jesus really cared about people and was overflowed with compassion for people who were who were oppressed and by the religious leaders. And so I think that, I think for me, it's just been a slow learning in the last, probably just in my 20s about all of this. So, yeah.
For me, I think the people pleaser in me was kind of given a one-way ticket out of here as far as just not being able to be compatible. Because I'm such a people pleaser. The people I'm around, I want to support and encourage. But I think you find, as you look at your whole social circle, that I have friends who I love and who love me on all different sides of all different arguments. And so for me, what I realized was really important for me, not just to agree with that person because I'm with them, but actually come up with why I believe come up with a stance and why I believe that in all regards, in everything. And it's something we should always be doing, even, why I believe certain things about the Bible. Not that I'm always going to act on those, but if one day somebody comes and what's your thought on it, I want to be prepared to have an answer.
That's good.
So, yeah, and for me, I was always kind of not my thing, try to stay silent. And kind of one thing I said in my message is I don't think silence is an answer anymore. Again, not saying we have to launch forward and everything, but I think like I have to have at least some sort of response as to kind of why I'm making the choice I am, taking the stance I am.
It's good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
another thing I think I've been seeing that wasn't even on my radar before is with the social justice B influence, the unbiblical kind, it's very dangerous for the church because we want to do justice, and so if we're not thinking with discernment, we can really start buying into neo-Marxist, even critical race theory kinds of views that are a complete contradiction to biblical Christianity, and we start going down a path that can be dangerous. So I don't want to be overly alarmist, but I do believe that there can be some real potential dangers. I think there really are some dangers in the church by not understanding this with discernment.
Yeah, my prayer is for our young people or generation under us is that they can be real pioneers of like Jesus, justice, tethered to God's word, like that, like. And I see students in our youth group that are like doing this so well. I'm just so proud of them. I'd love to see a generation that doesn't swing too far to the neglect of justice and mercy, of God's heart. So we'll see.
yeah, and it's a learning curve, right? If we were to look at ourselves 10 years ago, like we definitely needed some reining in on certain things. So, but yeah, all right. Well, kind of the last thing you said that a question was presented to you, and we always want to take the opportunity to answer those. So,
yeah, one question. So I was talking about how all injustice comes from not worshiping God, or actually, it comes from not giving God His due. So in a sense that when we're not worshiping Christ and putting Him first, then we're going to start acting out in a lot of unjust ways. And so here's the questions, and a good question. Since that's true, and if that's true, then how come in the name of God, in the name of Christianity, there has been a fair amount of injustice throughout history? Whether you're talking, crusades, slavery, some other kinds of oppressive things that have happened, sort of in the name of God, in the name of religion. So yeah, that was a pretty good question. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, really well-intentioned people do really messed up stuff. I mean, we've all done that. I think again, you get in these echo chambers and everyone says certain things and you might you and your denomination might really feel strongly about something for hundreds of years until, you get someone like Martin Luther that's like, no, this is not how we do, this is not how you should do things, And so, it's very sobering of the things that have been done in the name of the Lord, oppression on women, homophobia, all kinds of different things,
Yeah, and those things were done in the name of God, not the heart of God, right? Like we misstepped. And I've realized in my own life and just things I've been a part of, how quick we can get in I'm doing this because that's how we've always done it, and not actually sat and challenged something or let's revisit this, why do we do it? I know for me, like I can do that. And so to think that these denominations for hundreds of years, well, I was raised by my mentor. This is how he did it. Obviously, I'm going to do it that way. 100 years of something really evil go by, and you're like, whoa, oh, crud. We have to kind of stop and think. And especially in today's world when we're busy and we're doing so much, we're going. Like, I'm not going to stop and take the energy to like fix what's not broken, not realizing that it's broken. So that's kind of what I've realized is that that's what we've always done. So why wouldn't we keep doing it?
Yeah, those are good answers. Yeah, I don't much to add. Other than the Bible calls us out on this very thing. The gap between what we say we believe and what we actually do, how we live. So yeah, there's ignorance gaps, maybe because of not being as biblical as people might think. Just because you're in church or you say you're this or that doesn't necessarily mean anything. Do you really know what is at the heart of God on these issues? In addition to that, and I know this to be true for me, like I can talk the talk, but after the sermon's done, that's when the rubber really hits the road. Like I'm really going to live what I just talked about. So, lots of that going on, lots of talk, not a lot of walk. For sure. Witnessing to a guy recently over in Merlin, and he that's what he would say. Yeah, Christians, lots of talk, not a lot of walk. So I'm like, yeah.
You're like, wait, what did you say to that?
Yeah, how did you respond?
Oh, I said, yeah, I agree with you. That's why Jesus came to save us. And don't look at the people. Don't focus on people. 'Cause you'll never become a Christian if you're just looking at people. I mean, there's some wonderful Christians, don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it's that Christ needed to come and did, and
sure.
So
Cool. Yeah, good answers, good questions. Well, let's wrap it up with some resources.
Yeah.
I think it's important to note the book that
I shared with Downtown.
Yeah.
Confronting injustice without compromising truth by Thaddeus Williams. Great book.
Yeah, Rogue River heard it too. I led with our view on social justice will be transformed by how we answer a few questions: that who is God, what is wrong, and how do we make it right, and what's the purpose of the church? Like,
That's good.
Yeah, definitely threw a plug in for that book because it was good. So.
Yeah, right.
Anything else from you guys?
Yeah, a resource I really like. Preston Sprinkles, obviously, he does a podcast called Theology in the Raw, and so he unpacks a lot of these topics. And I would just say get into maybe listen to some podcasts of churches who are in bigger cities who are dealing with a lot more of this type of stuff. I think that's important, as long as the church is
Solid.
Yes, solid
Yeah.
and all of that. And so I think there's some great podcasts out there in the bigger cities. So.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, thank you very much. This will not be the last time I have you on. Mark, I'm pretty sure you're tabbed for next week, but I forget. Listeners, just we thank you for staying tuned to us and listening to us week in and week out. Next week, we are looking at the topic.
Tribalism.
It's tribalism. I'm oddly excited for this one. I kind of wish I was teaching on it, but it's just going to be very interesting because it's very relevant to...
It sure is.
Yeah.
Yep.
So you guys, thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim.
And listeners, we will see you next week.
All right.